Ever found yourself scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, replaying that text you sent, the one that got left on read? Or maybe you've bent over backward to impress someone who barely notices you, only to feel that sting of rejection yet again. We've all been there, that nagging voice in your head whispering, "Why am I doing this? Why do I keep chasing validation from someone who doesn't value me?" It's exhausting, isn't it? But here's the hard truth. Simping isn't just about romance, it's a surrender of your self-respect, your time, and your peace of mind. And the worst part, it never gets you what you truly want. That's where Stoicism comes in. This ancient philosophy, practiced by emperors and warriors, isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about mastering them. Imagine having the unshakable confidence to walk away from toxic dynamics, the discipline to invest in yourself first, and the clarity to see manipulation or one-sided effort from a mile away. Stoicism teaches you how to reclaim your power, not through games or mind tricks, but through timeless principles that fortify your mind against neediness and desperation. In this video, we're diving deep into 25 Stoic disciplines that will strip away simping behavior for good. These aren't quick fixes or hollow pickup lines. They're mental frameworks that rebuild your self-worth from the ground up. You'll learn how to detach from outcomes, set unbreakable boundaries, and cultivate a magnetism that comes from genuine self-mastery. By the end, you won't just stop simping, you'll wonder why you ever started. So if you're ready to trade anxiety for abundance and chasing for choosing, let's begin. The first and most foundational discipline is Amor Fati, the Stoic practice of not just accepting your fate but loving it. Picture this: you pour your energy into someone who doesn't reciprocate, and instead of feeling crushed, you welcome the rejection as if you chose it. That's the power of Amor Fati. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, every closed door isn't a failure, it's redirection. When you internalize this, desperation evaporates. Think about how simping works. You fixate on someone's potential rather than their reality, bending yourself into knots to make them want you. But Amor Fati flips the script. It asks, what if their indifference isn't a problem to solve, but a gift? Imagine the freedom of seeing rejection not as a judgment of your worth, but as a sign you're being steered toward better alignment. The person who ghosts you, they just freed up time for deeper connections. The one who keeps you on the hook, they're teaching you to value your own boundaries. This isn't about pretending rejection feels good, it's about recognizing that resistance to reality is what creates suffering. Seneca put it bluntly, you suffer more in imagination than in reality. Obsessing over what-ifs or trying to control how others see you is exhausting. Amor Fati cuts that cycle by anchoring you in what is. When you stop fighting reality, you stop bargaining for scraps of attention. You stop rearranging your life for someone who wouldn't cross the street for you. Here's how to practice it next time you're left on read or overlooked. Pause. Instead of spiraling, say, "This is exactly what's meant for me right now." Then act accordingly. Redirect that energy into something that does value you, your goals, your friends, your growth. Love your fate not because it's easy, but because it's yours. And in that ownership, you'll find something far more attractive than neediness, unshakable self-respect. Now let's talk about the second discipline, Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This sounds intense, but it's one of the most liberating tools Stoicism offers. Picture this: you're about to ask someone out, and your palms sweat just thinking about the possibility of rejection. That fear isn't just uncomfortable, it distorts your actions, making you hesitate, overanalyze, or worse, settle for less than you deserve. But what if you could strip that fear of its power? That's exactly what Premeditatio Malorum does. The Stoic Epictetus drilled this idea into his students. What upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. In other words, it's not rejection that crushes you, it's the story you tell yourself about it. Premeditatio Malorum flips fear on its head by forcing you to confront the worst-case scenario before it happens. Imagine sitting down and deliberately visualizing the person you like saying no, ghosting you, or even laughing in your face. Sit with that discomfort until it loses its edge. Why? Because once you've walked through the fire in your mind, the actual outcome can't shock you anymore. Here's the irony: most of us already do this, but backward. We obsess over rejection after it happens, replaying it like a horror movie. Premeditatio Malorum trains you to front-load that pain, so when reality hits, you're prepared. Seneca put it this way: the man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. This isn't pessimism, it's emotional armor. When you've already accepted that someone might not like you, you stop bending yourself into knots to make them like you. You speak freely, act authentically, and walk away with dignity because your self-worth isn't tied to their response. Think about how simpers operate. They agonize over texts, interpreting every delay as a catastrophe. But what if you reframed silence not as a crisis but as a neutral event? They haven't replied, okay, maybe they're busy, maybe they're not interested. Either way, I'll be fine. That detachment doesn't come from indifference, it comes from rehearsal. You've already lived through the worst in your mind, so the real thing feels manageable. Try this exercise. The next time you're tempted to overinvest in someone's attention, pause. Close your eyes and vividly imagine them rejecting you, ignoring you, or choosing someone else. Sit with the discomfort until your heartbeat steadies. Then ask yourself, if this happened, what would I do? Maybe you'd hit the gym, dive into work, or reconnect with friends. Suddenly, rejection isn't a death sentence, it's a detour you've already mapped. That's the power of Premeditatio Malorum. It doesn't just soften the blow of loss, it makes you fearless in pursuit of what you truly deserve. The third discipline is where Stoicism delivers its most brutal but liberating truth: the dichotomy of control. Here's the core idea: some things are within your power and some are not. Your actions, yours; their reactions, not yours, period. This sounds simple, but it's the root of nearly every simping spiral. Think about the last time you agonized over a text, crafting the perfect message, timing it just right, then obsessing over why they took hours to reply. That misery comes from one fatal mistake: confusing what you can control, sending the text, with what you can't, how they respond. Seneca hammered this home in his letters. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. When you fixate on someone's reaction, whether they'll like you, text back, or give you attention, you're handing them the keys to your emotional state. That's why double texting anxiety feels so degrading. It's not just about the words you send, but the silent plea behind them: please validate me. The dichotomy of control flips that script. It asks, what if their response isn't your business? Your job isn't to make someone value you. It's to act with integrity and let the chips fall where they may. Consider modern dating. You match with someone, banter effortlessly, then radio silence. The simp's brain goes nuclear. Was it something I said? Should I send a joke? A question, a self-deprecating meme, but the Stoic response is surgical. You controlled showing up authentically. Their engagement, not yours to manage. This isn't indifference, it's sovereignty. When you internalize the dichotomy, you stop policing your tone to avoid rejection. You stop resenting people for not meeting expectations you never voiced. You just do your part. Here's the practice. Next time you're tempted to overanalyze an interaction, physically list what's yours, your honesty, your effort, and what's not, their interest, their timing. Then, and this is critical, act only on your column. Send the text if it feels right, but don't refresh your inbox like a slot machine. Ask them out, but don't rehearse their yes. The moment you stop conflating effort with entitlement, a weight lifts. You'll realize desperation wasn't about them. It was about you outsourcing your worth to strangers. Stoicism doesn't teach you to stop caring, it teaches you to care better. Invest where you have agency, your growth, your boundaries, and let the rest go. That's how you trade anxiety for authenticity. Death isn't morbid, it's the ultimate wake-up call. Imagine standing at your own funeral and watching a highlight reel of your life. How much of it would be scenes of you anxiously waiting for a text back, or replaying conversations, hoping for crumbs of attention from someone who never truly saw you? That's the piercing question Memento Mori forces you to confront. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This isn't about fear, it's about urgency. When you truly grasp that your time here is limited, everything shifts. Think about the hours you've lost overanalyzing someone's social media activity or rehearsing the perfect thing to say just to keep their interest. Now imagine reclaiming that time, pouring it into skills that build your confidence, relationships that energize you, or passions that make you feel alive. That's the power of Memento Mori. It doesn't just remind you that life is short, it exposes the absurdity of wasting it on people who treat you like an option. The Stoics didn't dwell on death to depress you, they used it to strip away illusions. When you remember you're mortal, you stop postponing your self-respect. Here's the irony, simping often comes from a fear of loss. What if I never find someone like them again? But Memento Mori flips that. It asks, what if this is the only life you get and you're spending it begging for scraps? Picture two versions of yourself. One wastes years orbiting someone's indifference, shrinking to fit their whims. The other invests that same energy into becoming someone they're drawn to, not through games, but through unshakable self-assurance. Which legacy feels worth your limited time? This practice isn't about cynicism, it's about clarity. Seneca put it bluntly, it's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Next time you catch yourself over-investing in someone who barely notices you, pause. Ask, if I died tomorrow, would this be how I wanted to spend my last day? The answer isn't guilt, it's fuel. Use mortality as a lens to magnify what actually matters. Let death remind you you're too alive to be someone's backup plan. Here's the paradox no one tells you about modern dating. The more you chase comfort soothing your loneliness with constant texts, numbing rejection with endless scrolling, or seeking validation through likes, the weaker your resilience becomes. Simping isn't just a behavior, it's a comfort addiction, and the antidote, voluntary discomfort. The Stoic Musonius Rufus put it plainly, how can a person become courageous if they only seek what's pleasant? This isn't about masochism, it's about inoculation. Every time you willingly step into discomfort, you rewire your brain to stop fearing scarcity, the root of all simping. Think about how simping thrives in cushy environments. You slide into DMs because it's easier than risking face-to-face rejection. You refresh her Instagram because it's less vulnerable than asking her out directly. Every shortcut you take to avoid discomfort makes you more dependent on external validation. But voluntary discomfort flips the script. It's like lifting weights for your emotional resilience. Delete dating apps for a week. Go to a social event without checking your phone. Approach someone in person instead of hiding behind a screen. Each act trains you to tolerate uncertainty, the very thing that makes simping feel like a lifeline. Musonius Rufus taught that hardship is a teacher, not a punishment. He famously made his students sleep on the ground in winter, not because he was cruel, but because he knew comfort is a trap. The more you cozy up to instant gratification, the more powerless you feel when it's withheld. Ever noticed how the guy who can't go a day without texting his crush becomes desperate, while the one who's okay with silence holds the power? That's voluntary discomfort in action. By practicing small denials, fasting from attention, sitting with boredom, embracing rejection, you prove to yourself that you don't need validation to be okay. Here's the experiment. For the next 7 days, impose one discomfort daily. Cold showers, no social media after 8 p.m., a full day without complaining. Each time your brain screams for relief, notice the pull. That's your simping reflex being exposed. The goal isn't to suffer, but to discover you're stronger than your cravings. When you stop fearing discomfort, you stop clinging to people who treat you poorly. You'll start setting boundaries not as punishment, but as proof that your peace isn't negotiable. Comfort makes you needy. Voluntary discomfort makes you unshakable. Ever caught yourself idealizing someone, painting them as flawless in your mind, ignoring every red flag because your brain keeps shouting, but what if they're the one? That's not love. That's what the Stoics called an impression, a mental sketch your mind treats as fact, even when it's fiction. Epictetus warned, it's not things that disturb us, but our interpretations of them. Translation: the heartache of simping doesn't come from the person. It comes from the story you've glued to them. Modern psychology calls this limerence the obsessive daydreaming, where you replay conversations that never happened, assign meaning to coincidences, and twist their indifference into mystery. Sound familiar? Here's the Stoic antidote. Strip the fantasy with objective judgment. When you feel that dopamine hit from their attention, pause. Ask, what am I actually seeing here? Not what ifs or maybes, but cold, hard facts. Did they cancel plans last minute? That's data. Did they forget your birthday? That's evidence. Romanticizing potential is how you end up stranded in situationships, begging for crumbs from someone who's already shown you who they are. Contrast this with parasocial obsessions, the one-sided relationships we build with influencers or celebrities. We don't even know these people, yet we invest emotional energy imagining connections that exist only in our heads. The Stoics would call this the ultimate misuse of judgment. Marcus Aurelius practiced seeing things as they are without embellishment, a slap of clarity against the delusion that attention equals value. Here's how to apply it. Next time you're spiraling over someone, write down 3 concrete actions they've taken or haven't toward you. Not their charm, not their potential, just facts. Then ask, would I advise a friend to tolerate this? Objectivity doesn't kill romance, it kills neediness. When you stop confusing impressions with reality, you stop auditioning for people who haven't even bothered to read the script. The right ones won't make you work this hard to see them clearly. Getting ghosted or rejected stings, there's no way around it, but what if that pain wasn't a dead end but a detour to something better? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the essence of the obstacle is the way, a Stoic discipline that doesn't just help you survive rejection, it teaches you to weaponize it. Think about the guy who gets dumped and spends weeks drowning in self-pity, texting exes at midnight, begging for scraps of closure. Now picture the alternative, same heartbreak, different response. He channels that raw energy into something that can't reject him, the gym, his career, a new skill. 6 months later, he's unrecognizable, not because the pain disappeared, but because he used it as fuel. That's the pivot from victim to victor. The obstacle, the rejection, didn't break him, it rebuilt him. This isn't just motivational fluff. Neuroscience backs it. Emotional pain activates the same brain regions as physical pain. But here's the twist. When you redirect that energy into purposeful action, you rewire your response. Every rep at the gym, every hour invested in mastery, becomes a silent rebuttal to the voice whispering, "You're not enough." Marcus Aurelius called it turning the key, using adversity to unlock a version of yourself that wouldn't exist without the setback. Consider the stories we celebrate. David Goggins' brutal childhood fueled his ultra-endurance feats. J.K. Rowling's rejections birthed Harry Potter. The pattern: they didn't just endure obstacles, they harnessed them. Now apply that to simping, that unanswered text. It's not proof of your worthlessness, it's an invitation to invest in something that can't ignore you. The Stoics didn't preach resilience for its own sake. They saw resistance as raw material. A breakup isn't just a loss, it's free time to build the body, business, or mindset you've postponed. Here's how to practice it. Next time you're rejected, whether it's a date, a job, or a flaky friend, ask, what can this free up for me? Then physically redirect the energy. Delete their number and sign up for that course you've put off. Skip the late night scroll and hit the pavement for a run. The goal isn't to pretend it doesn't hurt, but to prove to yourself that pain isn't a prison, it's a propeller. When you stop seeing obstacles as stop signs and start treating them as launch pads, you don't just stop simping, you start thriving. Indifference in Stoicism isn't about becoming cold or emotionless, it's about reclaiming your freedom by refusing to let externals dictate your worth. Picture this, someone you're into starts flirting with you, and suddenly your heartbeat races, your palms sweat, and your whole mood hinges on their next message. That's not chemistry, that's dependency. Seneca saw this trap centuries ago. You become what you give your attention to. In other words, the more you emotionally invest in someone's whims, their texts, their mixed signals, their fleeting attention, the more power you hand them over your peace. Modern dating glorifies this addiction as playing it cool, but there's a brutal difference between pretending not to care and genuinely not needing to. The simp overthinks every emoji, rehearsing responses to seem aloof. The Stoic, though they're not performing indifference, they've cultivated it. Think of it like this. You wouldn't panic if a stranger didn't laugh at your joke, so why crumble when someone you barely know ghosts you? Indifference isn't a mask, it's the armor of someone who knows their value isn't up for debate. Seneca's letters to Lucilius crack this open. He warned against letting pleasure or pain from others stick to you. Flirtation feels good, enjoy it, but don't cling to it. Silence stings, acknowledge it, but don't let it derail you. This isn't emotional repression, it's emotional precision. The simp misreads indifference as apathy, so they swing between neediness and fake detachment. The Stoic practices active indifference, engaging fully, but never mortgaging their self-respect for a hit of validation. Here's the litmus test. Next time someone's hot and cold behavior triggers you, pause. Ask, am I reacting to them or to the story I've attached to them? Their actions are neutral until you assign meaning. Flirting isn't a promise, silence isn't a punishment. When you stop conflating attention with worth, you stop rationing your dignity. Indifference isn't about ignoring life's pleasures, it's about enjoying them without chains. Try this reframe. See every interaction as a bonus, not a benchmark. They text back, great. They don't, also fine. Your joy isn't hostage to their replies. That's the freedom Seneca championed, the kind that lets you walk away not out of spite, but because you've got better places to be. What if the person you're obsessing over vanished tomorrow, not tragically, but simply as if they'd never existed? How would your days actually change? This is the heart of negative visualization, a Stoic exercise that doesn't just reduce attachment, it shatters the illusion of scarcity that fuels simping. Cicero, the Roman statesman steeped in Stoicism, wrote, "We enjoy temporal advantages as if we were assured of them forever." That's the simp's curse, clinging to someone not because they're irreplaceable, but because you've convinced yourself they're your only option. Think about how attachment works in simping. You fixate on one person's attention, monitoring their social media, decoding their texts, twisting yourself into someone they'd want, all while ignoring the cost, the friendships you neglect, the hobbies you abandon, the self-respect you hemorrhage. Negative visualization flips this. It forces you to mentally delete them from your life and ask, what would I do with that reclaimed time? Who would I become without this emotional tax? Suddenly, their absence isn't a catastrophe, it's space. Space for better connections, deeper goals, or just quiet contentment. Here's the irony. Simpers fear loss so intensely, they never realize they're already living in it, losing themselves daily. Cicero called this the poverty of the imagination. By refusing to picture life beyond one person, you trap yourself in a self-made prison. Contrast that with the Stoic approach, deliberately visualizing loss not to torture yourself, but to appreciate what you do have, your autonomy, your potential, your freedom from emotional hostage-taking. Try this exercise for 1 week each morning. Spend 2 minutes mentally erasing the person you're fixated on. Picture your routines without them, your meals, your nights out, your conversations. Notice not the emptiness but the opportunities. Maybe you'd finally join that boxing gym. Maybe you'd reconnect with an old friend. The goal isn't to deny your feelings, but to expose the lie that they're your only source of happiness. Scarcity mindset whispers, if I let go, I'll never find this again. Negative visualization replies, if you don't let go, you'll never find what's better. When you stop fearing absence, you stop settling for breadcrumbs, and that's when real abundance begins. Imagine waking up each morning with an unshakable sense of ownership over your worth. No texts left unanswered have the power to derail your confidence. No lukewarm reception from someone you admire makes you question your value. That's the essence of Proherses' Epictetus' cornerstone concept of self-ownership. He didn't just preach this idea, he lived it. Born a slave, physically chained to another man's will, yet he taught that no one is free who is not master of themselves. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's the ultimate antidote to orbiting. Let's break down how simping violates self-ownership. You text someone first every time, just to check in. You mute their stories so you won't seem desperate, but still watch every post from a burner account. You convince yourself you're playing it cool, but your emotional GPS is set entirely to their location. Epictetus would call this voluntary slavery, handing over the keys to your self-worth to someone who didn't even ask for them. Proherses flips this dynamic by drawing a non-negotiable line. Your value isn't determined by who responds to you, it's cultivated by how you respond to yourself. Consider the orbiters you've seen, maybe even been the ones lingering in someone's periphery, hoping crumbs of attention will eventually turn into a meal. What keeps them stuck isn't lack of options, it's lack of self-possession. They've outsourced their judgment to another person's whims. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. In modern terms, if you want real connection, stop fearing disapproval so much that you become a ghost in your own life. Here's the practice. Next time you're tempted to overanalyze why someone hasn't replied, pause. Ask yourself, what part of this situation is truly mine to control? Not their interest, not their timing, only your choice to invest energy elsewhere. Self-ownership isn't about denying your feelings, it's about directing them where they have power. Delete the burner account, stop rehearsing conversations. Redirect that mental real estate into something that can't ignore you, a skill, a project, a passion. The breakthrough comes when you realize orbiting isn't love, it's loitering. Epictetus put it bluntly, it's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters. When you reclaim Proherses, you stop waiting for permission to matter. You don't just exit their orbit, you become your own gravitational center. Marcus Aurelius didn't just rule an empire, he ruled his own mind through a practice so simple yet profound that it cuts through Simping's emotional fog, journaling. Every night by candlelight, he'd dissect his day with ruthless honesty, asking himself questions like, what weakness did I indulge today? Or where did I give away my power? These weren't diary entries, they were mental surgeries, and here's why this matters for you. Simping thrives in the shadows of unchecked emotion, where longing masquerades as love and obsession disguise itself as dedication. Journaling drags those illusions into the light. Think about the last time you spiraled over someone's mixed signals. Your brain cycled through excuses. Maybe they're busy. Maybe I came on too strong but never landed on the truth. I'm investing more than they're worth. Marcus' journals, now known as meditations, model how to interrogate those impulses. One of his most piercing prompts, ask yourself, is this essential? Apply that to simping behaviors. Is monitoring their Instagram stories essential? Is rewriting texts 5 times essential? Or is it just fear of silence, of being forgotten, of facing the reality that they're not as invested as you? Here's the key distinction. Most people journal to vent emotions. Stoics journal to dissect them. Try this tonight. Write down one simping behavior you indulged in today. Maybe you checked their location on Snapchat or agonized over a like. Then ask 1. What did this cost me? Time, peace of mind. 2. What did I hope to gain? Validation, control. 3. Was the payoff worth it? Spoiler, it never is. This isn't about guilt, it's about pattern recognition. When you see in ink how often you trade dignity for dopamine hits, something shifts. You start catching yourself mid-spiral. Wait, I've written this scene before. Marcus also journaled gratitude, but not the fluffy, I'm thankful for sunshine kind. He'd list the privileges he took for granted, his health, his freedom, his ability to walk away from what didn't serve him. That's the secret weapon against simping, contrasting your desperation with your abundance. Try adding this prompt: what do I have that they can't take away? Maybe it's your craft, your friendships, your resilience. Suddenly, orbiting someone who barely notices you feels less like a craving and more like a waste. Journaling won't magically erase desire, but it does something better. It turns you into your own therapist. Over time, you'll spot the gap between what you say you want, a meaningful connection, and what you accept, crumbs of attention. And in that gap, that's where self-respect grows. Here's the irony: the more you document your emotional patterns, the less you'll need to. Clarity becomes habitual. You'll start feeling that itch to text them at midnight, then remember the 3 pages you wrote last week about how empty it left you. That's Stoic journaling's superpower. It doesn't just reflect your growth, it accelerates it. So grab a notebook and start confronting what simping tries to bury, the truth that you've always been the one worth waiting for. Ever notice how modern dating advice often feels like learning to perform rather than becoming someone worth pursuing? That's because most tactics focus on manipulating attraction instead of cultivating it. The Stoics took the opposite approach. They didn't chase validation. They modeled virtues so compelling that respect followed naturally. Take Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood unshaken as Julius Caesar's armies closed in. When offered clemency in exchange for submission, he chose death over compromise. Extreme, maybe, but here's the lesson: dignity isn't negotiable. That's the heart of discipline. 12. Replacing cheap tricks with virtues that make desperation impossible. Think about how pickup artists operate. They memorize scripts, employ negging, or play mind games to manufacture attraction. But what happens when the act slips? The mask cracks and the neediness beneath bleeds through. Contrast that with Cato, who never begged for approval. His power came from being, not performing. When you model Stoic virtues, courage to walk away, justice in honoring your worth, you stop asking to be chosen and start commanding it. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. B1. Let's break down 2 virtues that got simping at its core. First, courage, not the Hollywood kind, but the quiet resolve to delete a toxic connections number without drama. It's the strength to say, I'd rather be alone than undervalued, and mean it. The simp's Achilles heel: fear of scarcity. What if no one better comes along? Courage replies, then you'll thrive in your own company. Second, justice, not courtroom fairness, but the radical act of treating yourself as someone worth protecting. The Stoic hierarchs taught that we owe the same duty to ourselves as to our closest friends. Would you let a friend grovel for attention? Then why tolerate it for yourself? Justice in Stoicism means giving your needs equal weight, not as entitlement but as duty. Here's the pivot: modeling virtues isn't about perfection, it's about direction. You won't wake up as Cato tomorrow, but today you can choose one act of self-respect over self-abandonment. Skip the late night you up text, decline the breadcrumb dates. Each small no to desperation is a yes to something far more magnetic. The quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth isn't up for debate. The irony. While pickup artists teach you to fake value, Stoicism makes you embody it, and that's the ultimate power move. When you stop negotiating for love or respect, people stop offering discounts. Here's a trap we've all fallen into. You hold the door, you remember their favorite coffee order, you're always there when they need you, and then nothing. No reciprocation, no appreciation, just crickets. And that's when it starts, the bitterness, the "after all I've done for you" monologue playing on loop in your head. That's not virtue, it's emotional bookkeeping. Seneca saw this coming 2,000 years ago when he wrote, "We are apt to overestimate ourselves and undervalue others, especially in matters of obligation." In other words, entitlement isn't just unattractive, it's self-sabotage. The simp to resentment pipeline thrives on unexamined ego. You tell yourself you're a nice guy, but beneath that label, a ledger of expectations. If I text first every morning, she'll realize I'm dependable. If I listen to her vent for hours, she'll see I'm husband material. But here's the brutal truth: no one owes you affection for meeting imaginary criteria. Stoicism calls this circumscription of the ego, the practice of shrinking your self-importance down to its actual size. Marcus Aurelius did this daily, reminding himself, "You're just a soul carrying around a corpse, morbid, maybe, but effective." When you strip away the fantasy of being the protagonist in someone else's story, you stop confusing effort with entitlement. Let's dissect how this plays out in real life. The nice guy who fumes when his female friend starts dating someone less caring than him isn't heartbroken, he's bankrupted. His kindness wasn't a gift, it was a loan with invisible interest. Seneca warned about this in Letter LIX. The wise man considers intention, not outcomes. Did you listen to her problems because you genuinely cared, or because you were quietly drafting an IOU? One builds character, the other builds resentment. Here's the reframe: objectivity is your ally. Next time you catch yourself tallying favors, ask, would I still do this if no one ever found out? If the answer's no, you're not being kind, you're auditioning. And auditions come with rejections. This isn't about dismissing your efforts, but about detaching them from imagined rewards. The Stoics didn't advocate selflessness to be martyrs. They did it to liberate themselves from the roller coaster of others' responses. Try this exercise for a week. Every night, journal one act of kindness you performed, not for clout, not for cosmic brownie points, but simply because it aligned with your values. Then release it. No mental scoreboards, no secret expectations. Over time, you'll notice something radical. Your happiness stops being hostage to someone else's gratitude. You'll stop groveling for approval because you've unshackled your worth from transactional thinking. And here's the paradox Seneca uncovered: humility isn't self-erasure, it's self-possession. The less you need your niceness to be rewarded, the more authentic your connections become. No more covert contracts, no more simmering frustration. Just relationships built on mutual choice, not emotional debt. That's when you stop being the guy who expects love and start becoming the man who inspires it. Here's the silent epidemic of modern dating: the instant reply. That reflexive need to answer a text the second it arrives, to fill every silence with words, to prove your worth through sheer availability. It's not just a bad habit, it's the crack in your foundation that simping exploits. Epictetus, the Stoic who transformed philosophy from theory to action, laid down the antidote centuries ago. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. That gap, that's where your freedom lies. Think about how simping trains you to react on autopilot. Their text buzzes, your heart races, fingers fly, and suddenly you've sent 3 paragraphs dissecting a movie they mentioned once. Or worse, they leave you on read, and within minutes you're drafting a follow-up to your own message. This isn't connection, it's conditioning. Your brain learns that attention is scarce, so you scramble to grab it like the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. Delayed response shatters that reflex by inserting one critical question. What would a person who values their time do? The Stoics didn't just preach patience, they engineered it. Take Julius Caesar, who allegedly made a habit of reading letters twice before replying, not because he was slow, but because he refused to let urgency masquerade as importance. Compare that to the modern simp refreshing his inbox like a slot machine, mistaking immediacy for intimacy. Every knee-jerk reply reinforces the same toxic belief: their attention is worth more than your dignity. Here's how to retrain your brain. Next time a notification pops up, physically set a timer. Start with 10 minutes. Use that window to ask: 1. Does this demand an instant reply, or am I just afraid of silence? 2. If I wait an hour, will the conversation actually suffer? 3. What's the cost of treating my time as less valuable than theirs? This isn't about playing games, it's about reclaiming agency. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood that real power isn't controlling others, it's governing your own impulses. When you stretch that space between ping and reply, something extraordinary happens. You stop needing their validation to feel steady. The right people won't interpret your pause as disinterest, they'll respect it as the mark of someone who isn't desperate. And here's the secret bonus: delayed responses expose emotional vampires. The ones who thrive on your instant attention will fade when they realize you won't jump on command. Meanwhile, those who value substance over speed will lean in closer. Your silence becomes the filter that separates transactional connections from real ones. Try this today. Let one message sit while you finish a chapter, take a walk, or cook a meal. Notice how the world doesn't end. Notice how your nerves settle. That's Stoicism in action, not just knowing you're enough, but behaving like it. Picture this: you're debating whether to double text someone who left you on read. Your gut churns. Fingers hover over the keyboard, that familiar itch for closure tightening its grip. Now pause. What would someone truly wise do here? Not a pickup artist, not your equally desperate friend, but a person of unshakable clarity, a Stoic sage. This mental pivot is the essence of contemplation of the sage, a discipline that doesn't just curb simping, it rewires your entire approach to desire. The Stoics envisioned the sage as their North Star, an idealized figure who navigates life with perfect rationality, untangled from petty emotional storms. Epictetus described this standard as someone who is sick and yet happy, in peril and yet happy, dying and yet happy. Extreme maybe, but when applied to modern dating, it's a revelation. The simp reacts to silence with panic, to breadcrumbs with gratitude, to rejection with bargaining. The sage, they respond, not with suppression, but with sober alignment to their values. Let's get concrete. Say your crush suddenly goes cold after weeks of flirting. The simp's script kicks in. Maybe I came on too strong. Maybe if I give them space, they'll miss me. Notice the focus, fixing their perception. The sage lens flips it. Does this behavior align with the respect I deserve? No groveling, no games, just a clear-eyed assessment. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in Meditations, constantly asking, what would Zeus do? For you, it's simpler. What would the most self-respecting version of me do? Here's the contrast in action. A simp stalks an ex's social media, dissecting every post for hidden meaning. The sage, they'd ask, does this serve my peace or poison it? And act accordingly. One operates from scarcity, I might never find this again. The other from sovereignty, I attract what I embody. The sage isn't devoid of emotion, they're just unwilling to let it hijack their dignity. This isn't about moral superiority, it's about creating space between impulse and action. Try this tonight. The next time romantic anxiety strikes, physically step away. Walk around the block, then ask: 1. What's the wise response here? Not the easiest or most reactive, but the one that honors my long-term self-respect. 2. Am I acting from genuine care or fear of loss? 3. If I observed a friend in this situation, what would I advise? Distance reveals truth. The simp confuses intensity with intimacy, mistaking obsessive thoughts for deep connection. The sage knows better. They've disciplined their mind to distinguish between genuine affection and the cheap dopamine of intermittent validation. And here's the breakthrough: you don't need perfection to benefit from this lens. Even attempting to channel sage-like clarity exposes simping for what it often is: not love, but fear masquerading as passion. Every time you choose wisdom over reactivity, you're not just avoiding a cringe moment, you're building the kind of character that makes desperation unthinkable. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, put it bluntly: "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak." Modern translation: obsessing over someone's mixed signals isn't listening, it's mental chatter. Real wisdom, it speaks softly but carries an unshakable truth. You're not here to beg for love. You're here to embody it, first for yourself, then for those worthy of your overflow. Imagine holding a handful of sand. Clench your fist too tight, and it all slips through your fingers, but keep your palm open and the sand rests there effortlessly. That's the paradox of non-attachment. The harder you grasp for love or validation, the faster it evaporates. Seneca captured this perfectly when he wrote, "Enjoy without clutching, desire without demanding." This isn't apathy, it's the art of engaging fully while keeping your heart light enough to walk away if needed. The simp confuses intensity for intimacy, believing that white-knuckling a connection proves its worth. But Stoicism and Buddhism, its philosophical cousin, teaches a radical alternative. You can care deeply without making your happiness hostage to outcomes. Think about how attachment corrupts desire. You meet someone amazing and instantly your brain starts scripting futures, dates, vacations, even how you'll decorate your shared apartment. Then, when reality doesn't match the fantasy, you contort yourself to force it into alignment. Texts become strategic campaigns. Silence becomes a crisis to solve. This is the trap Seneca warned about. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Non-attachment isn't about rejecting joy, it's about rejecting the dependency on specific people to deliver it. Buddhism's first noble truth mirrors this. Suffering arises from craving, not desire itself, but the clinging to desire. In modern terms, it's fine to want a great relationship. But when that want twists into "I'll die if they don't choose me," you've crossed into simping territory. The Stoic-Buddhist overlap here is striking. Both philosophies recognize that freedom isn't found in getting what you want, but in no longer being enslaved by the wanting. Here's how this plays out in practice. Say you're dating someone new. The attached version of you scrutinizes every interaction for clues. Did they text first today? Was that emoji warmer than yesterday's? The non-attached version, they enjoy the moment without auditing it. They don't need the other person to act a certain way to feel secure. This shift isn't magic, it's mindfulness. Epictetus taught his students to preface every potential attachment with, "if it is so ordained," before diving in. Modern translation: "I'd love to see where this goes, but my worth isn't on the line either way." Try this reframe. Next time you catch yourself overanalyzing someone's behavior, pause. Ask, am I enjoying this person or auditioning for them? Attachment clings to what could be, non-attachment savors what is. That's the sweet spot. Seneca described the ability to love without mortgaging your peace. And here's the ultimate test of non-attachment. Could you walk away from someone you adore if they disrespected your boundaries? Not with drama, not as a tactic, but with quiet certainty. That's the difference between Stoic detachment and simp desperation. One comes from abundance, the other from scarcity. When you stop needing someone to complete you, you start choosing them freely, and that's the kind of love that never requires groveling. Think about the last time you felt that pit in your stomach, the gnawing ache when someone didn't text back, the restless itch to check if they've posted stories without you. That discomfort, it's your soul whispering a brutal truth. You've anchored your happiness to someone else's whims. Marcus Aurelius called this out centuries ago. Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. That fountain isn't just a metaphor, it's eudaimonia, the Stoic North Star for fulfillment. Not fleeting pleasure, not borrowed validation, but deep, unshakable well-being that comes from living in alignment with your highest self. Here's the radical shift. Healthy relationships don't come from chasing love, they emerge when you're already whole. The simp's fatal error is believing someone else's attention will fill his emptiness, but Marcus saw through this. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Translation: no amount of external validation can compensate for internal poverty. Picture two men at a party. One scans the room for approval, laughing too loud at jokes he doesn't find funny. The other stands quietly, genuinely enjoying himself whether people engage or not. Who commands more respect? Who attracts effortlessly? The difference isn't charm, it's sovereignty. This isn't theoretical. Neuroscience confirms it. When you derive worth from external sources, likes, replies, hookups, your brain treats them like addictive hits. Each dose of validation lights up the same circuits as sugar or cocaine, leaving you craving more. Eudaimonia rewires that dependency. It's the difference between drinking salt water to quench thirst and tapping into a freshwater spring. The Stoics didn't just preach self-sufficiency, they engineered it through daily practices. Marcus journaled not to vent, but to excavate his own wisdom. Seneca took poverty baths, wearing ragged clothes and eating plain food to prove his happiness wasn't tied to comfort. These weren't masochistic stunts, they were resistance training for the soul. So how do you apply this? Start by auditing your emotional expenses. For 1 week, track every time you check your phone hoping for a notification. Modify your opinions to fit someone's vibe-suppressed needs to avoid rocking the boat. Each instance is a withdrawal from your self-worth account. Now reinvest that energy inward. Read the book you've postponed. Take that solo hike. Sit with silence until it becomes a friend, not a void to fill with chatter. The paradox: the less you need love, the more capable you become of giving and receiving it authentically. Eudaimonia isn't rejection of connection, it's the foundation for connections that don't cost you your peace. As Marcus put it, nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Cultivate that inner sanctuary and you'll stop renting happiness from others, you'll own it outright. Pre-commitment isn't just about saying no. It's about drawing lines so clear you never have to hesitate when someone crosses them. Cato the Younger, the Stoic who even Caesar couldn't corrupt, didn't decide in the moment whether to stand his ground. He'd already sworn an oath to his principles long before temptation knocked. That's the power of pre-commitment, turning your values into unbreakable rules so weakness never gets a vote. Modern simping thrives in the gray areas, those maybe just this once, moments where you overpraise someone hoping they'll notice you, or tolerate disrespect because you've convinced yourself this time is different. The Stoics called this akrasia, the gap between knowing what's right and doing otherwise, but pre-commitment slams that gap shut. Imagine setting non-negotiables before you even meet someone. No idolizing strangers with compliments I don't mean. No canceling plans last minute for someone who wouldn't do the same. These aren't restrictions, they're liberation in disguise. By anchoring your behavior to virtues like self-respect and justice before emotions cloud your judgment, you remove the agony of debating your worth in real time. Cato's life was a masterclass in this. When Rome's elite were bribing voters with banquets, he refused, not because he didn't enjoy feasts, but because he'd already sworn off anything that could compromise his integrity. He didn't wrestle with temptation, his pre-commitments wrestled it for him. Apply this to dating. If you've already vowed no double texting unless it's urgent, you won't waste mental energy at midnight convincing yourself this unanswered message deserves an exception. Your values become the guardrails, not your fleeting emotions. Here's the critical nuance: pre-commitment isn't about rigidity, it's about intentionality. The simp's downfall is reacting to every emotional weather change. The Stoic thrives by building his house on bedrock. try this exercise. Write down 3 behaviors that betray your self-respect, e.g., laughing at offensive jokes to fit in, paying for every date despite their income. Then craft a pre-commitment for each. If someone insults me, I'll pause for 10 seconds before responding. If I'm always initiating plans, I'll step back for 2 weeks. These aren't punishments, they're promises to your future self. The magic lies in rehearsal. Visualize scenarios where your pre-commitments kick in. She flakes last minute. You already decided you won't reschedule more than once. He's vague about exclusivity. Your rule says after 3 months, it's clarity or goodbye. When you've mentally practiced standing firm, real-life tests feel less like crises and more like rituals. And here's what Cotto understood that most miss. Pre-commitments protect both of you. They filter out people who'd exploit ambiguity and attract those who respect clarity. The right person won't fear your boundaries, they'll mirror them. That's the ultimate Stoic paradox. By refusing to compromise, you don't narrow your options. You elevate them. No more negotiating love from a position of hunger. You'll dine only at tables that set a place for your dignity. Late at night, when you're spiraling over why they haven't texted back or replaying that awkward interaction for the 100th time, there's a Stoic exercise that can snap you out of it instantly. Marcus Aurelius called it the view from above, a mental shift so jarring yet liberating that it makes romantic obsession feel absurd by comparison. Picture this: you're not just seeing your life from a few feet away, but from the edge of the cosmos. Earth shrinks to a speck, cities vanish into pixels, your crush, a microscopic blip on a timeline spanning millennia. That's the perspective Marcus used to gut-check his own fixations, writing in Meditations. Think of the universal substance, of which you have a very small portion, and of universal time, of which a short and indivisible interval has been assigned to you. Translation: your suffering isn't just small, it's temporary. This isn't about dismissing your feelings, it's about contextualizing them. Think of how simping warps your perception. Someone's indifference feels like the end of the world because you've magnified their presence in your mental universe. The view from above reverses that distortion. Imagine zooming out on Google Maps until your neighborhood disappears. Suddenly, the coffee shop where you agonized over their latte order isn't even visible. That's the Stoic secret. Obsession thrives in tunnel vision but dissolves in panorama. Marcus didn't just ponder stars, he used them as emotional armor. When political betrayal stung, he'd remind himself, in the infinity of time, this scandal won't even register. Apply that to modern heartache, that girl who ghosted you. In 5 years, her name will barely surface in memory. In 50, it'll be dust. This isn't nihilism, it's relief. The view from above doesn't make love meaningless, it makes neediness optional. Try this tonight. Stand outside under the night sky or pull up a NAS, an image of the Milky Way. Then mentally layer your worries onto it, that text thread you've overanalyzed. It's not just insignificant to the cosmos, it's insignificant to future you. The Stoics called this sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all things. Your romantic turmoil isn't unique, it's a variation on a theme as old as humanity. Thousands before you have survived unrequited infatuation. Thousands more will. Here's the twist: this exercise isn't just for pain, it's for pleasure too. That euphoria when they finally text back, also fleeting. The view from above balances both highs and lows, teaching you to savor joy without clinging to it. Modern psychology calls this temporal distancing a proven tool to reduce emotional intensity. When you stop treating every interaction as life or death, you start engaging from a place of abundance, not starvation. Marcus had a brutal but beautiful mantra: the universe is change, life is opinion. Your fixation isn't about them, it's about the story you've glued to them. Peel it off, and what remains? Just another human, as fragile and fleeting as you. That's the ultimate freedom the view from above offers, the realization that no one holds the keys to your happiness, because in the grand scheme, we're all just passing stardust, learning to let go. Imagine being released from a job you hated, the constant stress, the sleepless nights, the gnawing sense that you were wasting your time. At first, it stings. But then, slowly, you realize you're free. No more toxic boss, no more meaningless tasks. That's exactly how Epictetus taught us to frame rejection, not as loss, but as emancipation. He wrote, "Freedom isn't secured by filling up on your heart's desire, but by removing your desire." Think about that. The simp clings to crumbs of attention like a prisoner begging for scraps under the cell door, while the Stoic recognizes the jailer's absence as the real gift. Here's the mental shift. Every time someone walks away, flakes or ghosts, they're not just rejecting you, they're freeing you from the exhaustion of performing for their approval. Freeing you from the anxiety of deciphering mixed signals, freeing you to invest that energy into people and pursuits that choose you back. The simp sees rejection as proof he's unworthy. The Stoic sees it as proof he's been misallocating his worth. Epictetus, born into slavery, understood this viscerally. His famous metaphor, "If you kiss your child, your spouse, your friend, remind yourself you're kissing a mortal." Not to be morbid, but to savor the moment without chains of attachment. Apply that to modern dating. That person who strung you along for months, they weren't your future, they were sand slipping through your fingers. And their departure, that's the wind clearing space for something solid. Consider the toxic dynamic simpers tolerate, waiting weeks for a reply, twisting themselves into pretzels to seem chill, swallowing disrespect to avoid rocking the boat. Now contrast that with the Stoics' gratitude for escape. Marcus Aurelius journaled nightly about thanking even his enemies, not for their cruelty, but for the lessons they forced him to learn. The obstacle becomes the way. The person who rejects you isn't a villain. They're the unwitting mentor showing you where not to invest your heart. Here's the practice. Next time you're ghosted or dismissed, physically write down 3 things their absence now allows. Maybe it's time for the gym instead of overanalyzing texts. Maybe it's energy for a project you've neglected. Maybe it's simply the relief of no longer negotiating your value. Epictetus called this turning the key, using rejection to unlock a life that wouldn't have fit the old constraints. And here's the irony the Stoics uncovered. Gratitude for freedom isn't passive. It's active. It's deleting their number instead of lurking their socials. It's saying next instead of why not me. It's recognizing that the real loss wasn't their presence, it was the time you spent begging for it. When you stop seeing rejection as a door slamming shut and start seeing it as a cage opening, you don't just move on, you level up. That's the ultimate power move, treating their indifference not as a verdict but as the universe's way of whispering, "You're worth more." Ever catch yourself replaying a conversation about your crush with friends, dissecting every look, every text, every vague social media post? That nervous chatter isn't harmless venting, it's emotional kindling, feeding the very fixation you're trying to escape. Marcus Aurelius saw this trap 2,000 years ago when he wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." Every time you verbalize your obsession, you're not releasing it. You're engraving it deeper into your psyche. There's a neurological reason complaining backfires. When you repeatedly vocalize attachment, your brain strengthens those neural pathways like a well-worn trail. Soon, mere thoughts of them trigger the same emotional spikes as actual encounters. The Stoic antidote: silence as surgery, not repression, but strategic restraint, starving the fixation of the oxygen it craves, your attention. Marcus' journals reveal a man who confronted his own weaknesses through private reflection, not public lament. He didn't deny his struggles with temptation or grief. He simply refused to dignify them with an audience. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Modern therapy often encourages expressing your feelings, but the Stoics recognized a crucial nuance: not all expression is equal. Contrast trauma processing, which requires articulation, with the cyclical venting that simpers mistake for catharsis. The difference: one seeks resolution, the other seeks validation for stagnation. Ever notice how recounting your crush's mixed signals to friends leaves you more agitated, not less? That's because you're not solving, you're rehearsing. Here's the pivot: replace complaint with constructive silence. Next time you're tempted to dissect their latest Instagram story with your group chat, pause. Open your Notes app instead and ask: 1. What evidence do I actually have of their interest or character? Not hunches, facts. 2. Is this narrative serving my peace or my obsession? 3. What action would align with my self-respect right now? Marcus modeled this in Meditations. When betrayed by a trusted general, he didn't gather allies to vilify the man. He wrote privately, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant," not to dwell on their flaws, but to prepare his own response. That's the power of silent self-reform. It shifts the locus of control inward. The simp's curse is believing vocalizing pain will disperse it. The Stoic knows better. Some fires grow when you fan them. Try a 48-hour moratorium on crush talk. Notice how silence doesn't magnify your longing. It exposes its fragility. Without the echo chamber of friends' reassurances or conspiracies, the fixation starts feeling smaller. And here's the unexpected reward. When you stop performing your attachment for others, you stop performing it for yourself. The right connections won't demand your obsessive chatter. They'll meet you in the quiet spaces where real bonds live. As Seneca reminded Lucilius, language most shows a man, speak that I may see you, or in this case don't. Let your absence of words reveal the presence of your growth. Here's a secret your brain won't tell you. Every time you refresh your inbox hoping for their reply, every time you post a gym selfie just to see if they'll like it, you're not just seeking attention, you're poisoning your own peace. Epictetus saw this coming centuries ago when he warned, "Don't seek to have events happen as you want them to, but want them to happen as they do, and you'll go on well." Translation: your craving for applause, whether from a crush's text or an Instagram like, is the very chain that keeps you enslaved to simping. Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics intuited. Every ping of validation lights up your brain's reward system like a slot machine. That rush when they finally reply after hours, that's dopamine, the same chemical gamblers chase. The simp's tragedy isn't just that he feeds this addiction, it's that he mistakes it for connection. Social media engineered this perfectly endless scrolls of intermittent reinforcement, training you to confuse attention with worth. But here's the twist Epictetus uncovered. Freedom doesn't come from getting more likes, it comes from needing fewer. Compare two men at a party. One orbits his crush, laughing too loud at her jokes, subtly angling for her approval. The other engages genuinely, unconcerned whether she notices him. The difference isn't confidence, it's source code. The first man's mood is an external API pinged by others' reactions. The second runs on internal servers. Stoicism calls this autarky, self-sufficiency so rooted that applause becomes optional, not oxygen. The solution isn't deleting your apps, though a 30-day detox can reboot your brain. It's recalibrating your relationship with validation. Start small, post a photo and leave your phone in another room. Reply to messages when you choose, not when the ping demands. Notice how discomfort initially screams, "What if they think I don't care?" then fades into quiet empowerment. Epictetus trained his students to practice poverty, not to suffer, but to confront their dependence on comfort. Your version: practice obscurity. Let moments pass unposted. Let text sit unanswered until calm replaces craving. Here's the brutal math. Time spent chasing digital nods is time stolen from becoming someone worth noticing. Marcus Aurelius journaled at dawn not for an audience but to align his soul. Beethoven composed masterpieces while going deaf, no applause in his silence, just pure creation. Detoxing from validation isn't deprivation, it's reclaiming the right to define your own worth. When you stop feeding the monster of external approval, you'll discover something shocking. You were never hungry to begin with, just mistaking the echo of others' opinions for your own voice. Imagine waking up to a silent phone, no dating app notifications, no dopamine hits from matches, just the quiet hum of your own thoughts. That's the essence of practicing poverty, not wallowing in lack, but voluntarily stepping back from comforts to rediscover what truly sustains you. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who made his students sleep on the ground and eat simple meals, wasn't punishing them. He was revealing a liberating truth: neediness grows in the soil of overconsumption. The more you rely on external validation, likes, matches, late-night texts, the emptier you feel without them. But when you temporarily renounce those crutches, something extraordinary happens. You remember who you were before you started begging for scraps. Let's break down how this applies to simping. Dating apps are designed to keep you hooked on the chase, swiping, matching, ghosting, repeat. Each notification acts like a slot machine payout, conditioning you to confuse attention with worth. But practicing poverty interrupts that cycle. It's not about quitting forever. It's a strategic reset. For 1 week, delete the apps, not as a punishment, but as an experiment. Notice the withdrawal symptoms: the itch to check your phone, the phantom vibrations, the irrational fear that the one might slip through your fingers while you're offline. Those cravings, that's your brain detoxing from validation addiction. Musonius took this further. He'd have students wear ragged clothes in public, not for humiliation, but to expose the lie that status equals security. Try the modern equivalent. Go to a social event without mentioning your job title or achievements. Watch how quickly you revert to being rather than performing. The simp's curse is believing he needs to impress to matter. Poverty practice shatters that illusion by forcing you to rely on something deeper: your character, your presence, your unadorned humanity. Here's the paradox: scarcity sharpens appreciation. When you fast from dating apps, 2 things happen. First, you stop treating people as disposable options. No more swiping while half asleep. No more juggling conversations like a bored CEO reviewing resumes. Second, and this is critical, you start noticing real-life connections. The barista who remembers your order, the friend who texts just to check in. These were always there, but you missed them while chasing digital ghosts. But the real magic lies in the rebound effect. After a week offline, you'll return to apps, if at all, with a new lens. That match who sends 1-word replies. No longer a puzzle to solve, but a clear sign of disinterest. The profiles that once dazzled now feel like empty calories. Why? Because poverty practice doesn't just reset your habits, it recalibrates your standards. You're no longer hungry, you're shopping from a place of abundance. Musonius posed a radical question. How can you expect to develop courage if you only seek what's pleasant? Apply that to romance. How can you expect to attract genuine connection if you've never practiced being enough on your own? Temporary poverty isn't deprivation, it's the ultimate act of self-respect. When you voluntarily step away from the buffet of attention, you stop eating crumbs just because they're within reach, and that's when the feast begins. You know that cringe-worthy moment when you get rejected in front of friends, or worse, when you realize you've been obsessing over someone who barely knows your name. Most guys spiral into shame or anger, but the Stoics had a counterintuitive weapon for these moments: laughter. Not the hollow, fake kind, but the deep, self-deprecating chuckle that cuts tension like a knife. Seneca, the philosopher who weathered exile, betrayal, and Nero's tyranny, wrote, "We should make light of all things and bear them with a smile. Our motto, as everyone knows, is live unafraid." That's the secret. Humor doesn't just soften the blow of rejection, it reveals its absurdity. Think about how simping amplifies embarrassment. You send a heartfelt message, they leave it on read, and suddenly you're replaying every word, convinced you've humiliated yourself forever. But here's the twist: the pain isn't in the act, it's in the seriousness you attach to it. When you can laugh at your own missteps, well, that flirtation attempt belongs in the cringe hall of fame. You strip rejection of its power to define you. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but emotional invulnerability. Humor is the quickest path there. Consider the difference between two men at a party. One gets shot down after a clumsy pickup line and slinks away, shoulders slumped. The other grins, turns to his friends and deadpans, and thus ends my brief but disastrous career as a Casanova. Who walks away lighter, who commands respect despite the stumble? Laughter transforms failure from a verdict into a vignette. Seneca didn't just philosophize about this, he lived it. Banished to Corsica on false charges, he wrote letters comparing the island's rugged terrain to a spa vacation for the soul. That's the alchemy of humor. It doesn't deny reality, it reframes it. Apply that to modern dating. Ghosted, guess my charm's so potent it's invisible. Friend zoned, finally, a title more permanent than boyfriend. The goal isn't to mask pain with jokes, but to expose how small that pain really is when held up to the light. Here's how to practice it. Next time romance backfires, craft a one-liner so ridiculous, even you can't take it seriously. Note to self, next time, maybe don't quote Shakespeare in a Tinder opener. The moment you laugh at yourself, you reclaim power over yourself. Because here's the truth no simp admits: rejection only stings when you treat it like a tragedy. Turn it into a comedy and suddenly you're not the victim, you're the stand-up act, and that's a role no one can cancel. Somewhere between clinging to what's slipping away and surrendering to what never was, there's a quiet art, the art of letting go. Not with resentment, not with dramatic farewells, but with the steady hands of someone who understands that all things, even the most aching attachments, are borrowed. This final discipline isn't just about moving on. It's about metabolizing every lesson we've covered: Amor Fati's embrace of fate, Premeditatio Malorum's rehearsal of loss, the Dichotomy of Control's ruthless clarity, until release isn't an act of defeat but of mastery. Think of a river. The simp stands knee-deep, gripping a rock so tightly his fingers bleed, convinced that if he just holds on, the current will reverse. The Stoic, he's the one who opens his palms and lets the water carry what it will. Not because he doesn't feel the tug of the undertow, but because he trusts his ability to swim. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything that exists is already fraying at the edges and in transition and soon to die." That's not pessimism, it's liberation. When you internalize that every relationship, every spark of attention is inherently fleeting, you stop treating love like a fortress to defend and start treating it like a sunrise to witness. Let's be clear, letting go isn't indifference, it's the opposite. It's loving something enough to not demand it contort itself to your needs. Picture two men at the end of a relationship. One begs, "Change your mind and I'll change myself to keep you." The other says, "I'll miss who you were, but I won't haunt who you're becoming." The difference isn't in how much they cared, it's in how much they respected their own boundaries. The Stoics called this eupatheia, healthy emotions. Grief is allowed, longing is human, but fixation, that's the shadow where self-abandonment grows. Here's the pivot: every discipline we've walked through converges here. The view from above reminds you this pain is a speck in your cosmic timeline. Negative visualization exposes how much of your suffering was imagined. Gratitude for rejection reveals the freedom you mistook for loss. Even humor, laughing at your own earnest missteps, disarms the shame that keeps you circling back. Letting go isn't one grand gesture. It's the sum of 1,000 small releases, deleting their number without fanfare, redirecting your thoughts without scolding, catching yourself mid-spiral and whispering, "No more." Marcus left us with a poignant truth in Meditations. Soon you'll be ashes or bones, a mere name at most, and even that is just a whisper. That's the ultimate frame. Not just for relationships, but for life. Every attachment you've white-knuckled, every person you've pedestalized their whispers too. The art of letting go isn't about ceasing to care. It's about caring more deeply for the unshakable things, your integrity, your growth, your ability to stand in the river of loss and still feel the sun on your skin. So when the time comes to release what no longer serves you, don't tear yourself away. Just loosen your grip. The water knows where it's going, and so do you. So here we are, 25 disciplines, each a surgical strike against the neediness, overinvestment, and self-abandonment that simping thrives on. Think of them as a detox protocol for your mind, step by step rewiring the patterns that have kept you chasing validation instead of commanding it. Start with Amor Fati, loving what happens, even rejection, because it's steering you toward what's truly yours. Then Premeditatio Malorum, rehearsing the worst so it loses its fangs. The Dichotomy of Control cuts through the noise, reminding you that their reactions were never your business to manage. Memento Mori shocks you awake. Life's too short to waste on people who treat you like an option. Voluntary discomfort toughens your resolve, proving you don't need crumbs of attention to feel full. Next, objective judgment strips away the fantasies you've glued to someone who's just a flawed human. The obstacle is the way turns rejection into fuel. Indifference isn't coldness, it's the freedom to engage without desperation. Negative visualization exposes the lie that losing them would break you. Proherses reclaims your self-ownership, no more orbiting someone else's whims. Journaling drags your obsessions into the light. Modeling virtues replaces games with genuine worth. Circumscription of the ego kills resentment by dissolving entitlement. Delayed response trains you to value your time as much as theirs. Contemplation of the sage asks, what would the wisest version of me do? Non-attachment teaches you to care deeply without clutching. Eudaimonia anchors your happiness inward. Pre-commitment sets boundaries so clear you never negotiate your worth in the moment. The view from above shrinks your heartache to cosmic perspective. Gratitude for rejection reveals the freedom in every closed door. Silence as surgery starves obsessions of oxygen. Detox from validation breaks your addiction to applause. Practicing poverty reminds you were enough before them and you'll be enough after. Humor disarms shame by laughing at your own stumbles. And finally, the art of letting go, not with bitterness, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows his worth, isn't up for debate. This isn't a checklist to rush through. It's a curriculum for becoming someone who doesn't just stop simping but forgets why he ever started. So tell me, which discipline will you wield first? Drop it in the comments, and if you're ready to go deeper, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. The road from desperation to sovereignty is longer than one video, but every step counts. Your future self is already thanking you.